We worked with the same people in the same place, doing the same thing day after day, until either we got lucky enough to be able to retire or we died. It was this way for too long, but we could hide it until COVID came, and then we couldn't hide anymore. And then what happened? People started leaving their jobs in droves. We started looking for work that fulfilled us and allowed us to be better parents and partners. Those who did stay at their jobs started working more from home on their own schedule. Instead of battling traffic every morning and afternoon, we spent more time doing the things we love in the places where we love to do them. And people are moving and taking their jobs with them. Work is changing, but not always in the right direction or fast enough. So rather than being a victim of change, we're driving change in the workplace. This is the moment.
Hey everybody, welcome to the HR Disruptor Summit virtual experience. My name is Jan Barlow, founder of the Summit, and welcome today. I am so excited. I have two of my favorite peeps here through the Summit. I have Michelle Witman and I have Kristin Durney, and I am just so excited to talk about the hot topic of the day, ladies: privilege conversations. And it is what you think. That's what I'm saying. It is what you think. So welcome today to the HR Disruptor Summit virtual experience. And we're going to spend some time today to unpack really what privilege conversations should be about. And first, I want Kristin Durney to share a little bit about her background, and then Michelle will. So Kristin, welcome, and thank you again for being a guest at the HR Disruptor Summit.
Thank you, Jane, for having me. I'm so excited to be here with both you and Michelle. So just a little bit about my background. I've been in human resources for 20 plus years, majority in the corporate world, and as an HR executive, and now I'm actually a consultant. And, just a little bit about background around, what I'm doing now. I'm a co-founder of Mental Wellness Unleashed, and really the importance behind and the significance behind starting Mental Wellness Unleashed is when I was in the corporate world, I just didn't see a lot around mental health. No one was talking about it. No one felt comfortable talking about it. No one knew how to open the conversation, and those types of things. And so I really thought I could do a lot, have maybe more impact and significance if I co-founded a company where we went in to help companies open the conversation, have psychological safety, talk about resilience, talk about anxiety, host anxiety parties. I mean, there's things that companies can do that can really open up those conversations where mental health, we all have it, becomes normalized. And it's important that we keep opening that conversation, having these conversations, and changing the narrative around mental health. So I'm so excited to be here today. And part of that conversation will be around privilege conversations and in the way that we need to narrate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristin. Michelle, please share with what's going on in your bubble and some of your background.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jan, for having me. And Kristin, it's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to co-facilitate and work and engage in meaningful, authentic, and real discourse, which is amazing. And so my name is Michelle Witman. I'm a middle-aged woman coming to you from New York, inside my home. And I come to you with my experience in the disability space. So I have been in the disability inclusion space for over 20 years, working both in the educational setting and in the corporate setting on a mission to make the world accessible, inclusive and accessible for all employees. And that includes people with disabilities. And so similar to Kristin, I co-founded a company several years ago. I had students leaving the education setting, ready to go into the workforce. And when they got to the workforce, they were fully prepared. They were able to advocate for themselves. They knew what they needed and they were able to access a job, but they weren't able to maintain their job and retain their job. And that's because the culture wasn't ready for them. So we go in and we founded a company. We said, when the students would come back and they'd say, Michelle, that's great. Thank you for all your work with me in the higher education space, but you failed me miserably. My partner, my co-founder and I were like, we will solve that problem. And so we are on a mission to work with organizations of all types, because the work really is agnostic at this point, to change the culture. and to make sure that the culture is ready and prepared and neutralizes the concept of mental health and disability in the workplace, so we really can deal with the underemployment and the unemployment of a really otherwise qualified, extraordinary group of people. We are missing the market in that space. So that's our work.
I love it. I love it. And you know what is interesting? What I really felt called when Kristin and I originally talked about this topic and brought, our partner in crime, Michelle, and said, let's really put a spin on this. And, when we talk about privileged conversation, in order to get people to open up and to become uncomfortable, to talk about the uncomfortable, right? You got to make a safe place for people, right? And that, the biggest part is judgment. I mean, we're human beings, and something that I think that we get really squirreled up in, especially in the traditional DEI space, is like we're trying to beat judgment out of people. Okay. Human beings have judgment. That's how we, look at contrast of life, right? We start to judge it, whether it's a bad or good experience. Well, when it comes to judgment, right, it really goes against what an empowerment position is, right? It gets squirreled up. I don't know how else to explain it. If you could, Michelle, share a little bit about judgment and when we talk about that versus empowerment.
Sure. So one of the things that we need to acknowledge is, I'm of the belief that when we are born and we enter into this world, we come naturally from a place of curiosity, right? And yet, as so many adults, like we sit and we're judgy and we're in judgment of people. So we went back to kind of figure out like, well, where did that shift happen? And for me, we did it specifically through like the lens of like, where did these concepts of disability or mental health being seen as a negative or dehumanizing people with, where did it come from? And so we started to look back, and I recalled like one example. I would say like when I was a little child, I would walk down the streets, right? And I would be alongside my parents. And by the way, like the adults in my life meant no harm. There was no malintent. But when I would go and walk and see a wheelchair user coming my way, a person using a wheelchair, I would want to go and I'd be curious and want to ask a question. And the response from the adults around us were like, don't stare, that's rude. And teaching a child at an early age, when they see somebody who looks different, who appears different, who is different than what they know, and that stands for culture, that goes along with everything. What we've taught that child is shut down that curiosity and instead place a judgment, right? So automatically we're othering them or people, and we're making assumptions, and we're starting to create an opportunity for judgment. When we think about in the area, in the realm of mental health and mental wellness and disability as well, we talk about a lot about the power of our early childhood experiences around movies and culture. And recently, there has been a real recommitment around authentic representation in those spaces. However, when I think about what I know about OCD, right, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, Kristin, but when someone asks me like, or says something about OCD, my immediate go-to, I think about Jack Nicholson in the movie As Good as It Gets. So when I think about characters who portrayed disabilities that I was first exposed to through the movies, I think about a character like Jack Nicholson in As Good as It Gets, where the individual with the mental health issue was required help from an expert other, was not able to be independent, required significant support. And that in reality doesn't match what we know about obsessive compulsive disorder. Right?
Wow. How many years ago was that movie? So it was portraying people with even that. So it with OCD as having to have a caregiver, right?
Right.
That's crazy.
Jen, like, and to that point, like I think about Rain Man, right? And I think about Dustin Hoffman. And for like generations, people who think about if that's what your initial understanding was of neurodiversity of somebody, of an autistic individual was Rain Man and Dustin Hoffman, like that is a portrayal of potentially a particular person with autism, right? That is not representative of autism, right?
Yes.
And or individuals.
Correct.
We like once you've met one person with a particular disability, you've met one person with that particular disability. That's where we have to say, okay, we have this judgment that, again, it's what we drank the water, we drank it. There is no shame in coming into this conversation with what we refer to as ableist tendencies, right? Like, because this is the world that we've been raised in and the world that we grew up in. And we can talk about the impact of our education system for people with disabilities and the impact of watching that short bus or the kids pulled out of my classroom as a young child, right? The kids in need of remedial services, the impact that had on our culture and our society. And so all of those children, all of us grew up with that, went into the workplace. And so as individuals are now accessing their rights and entering the workforce, and we have mental health issues and or we have disabilities and we see them as assets, we're entering a workforce that isn't matched up for us.
Yes.
So that's the importance of shifting the mindset to one of empowerment. And that key is we need to actively work hard to replace judgment and go back to a place of coming from a place of curiosity.
So,
Love that.
When we talk about judgments, and as I shared with, and not a lot of people, well, people that know me personally know that I have a brother that has cerebral palsy, right? And growing up, I mean, he's 5 years older than I am. And our family didn't look at him as having a disability. I mean, we didn't treat him any different. We all had limitations. But he had a physical disability. One leg was shorter than the other. He had a lot of, he was in a wheelchair, a lot of casts. So, but from our view, our family didn't enable him, right? We didn't make excuses. It was very healthy. But what's interesting is when I would see others like that, I guess formed, like you said, Michelle, we see TV shows that lump people, right, that have disabilities. From my perception, as far as lived experience, I didn't have those same judgments because I had a brother. We in our bubble was treated. We didn't have that judgment in our home. So what's interesting, though, when we talk about judgments of disabilities, right? What have you heard? Like, I know when physicians talk about, like, from our situation, the physician told my parents, now expect him not to, this was when he was 2 and 3, expect him he's not going to be able to go play sports. He's not going to, probably won't be going to school, with everybody else like a regular child. So we have physicians that, right, are coming to the table with these judgments. And I'm like going, are you kidding me? Really?
So two things that you mentioned that are really interesting to me. The first one, Jan, is you should know that when we're doing our work with companies and organizations and looking to shift culture, our work of where we want them to be really sits in the siblings of, not caregivers, not parents of children with disabilities, but siblings of who grew up alongside children or people with disabilities. Their view is what we're looking to capture, and we're looking to create a culture, a workplace culture. That's what we're looking for the norm to be. That's what we're looking around the disclosure model, around all of it, right? Because what you have, again, you grew up with an incredible privilege of only knowing like neutrality, right? So when we talk so it's you.
Yeah, as far as what's interesting that you said that we as a family took that viewpoint.
Yes.
But we were exposed to the public to where people would whisper.
Yes.
Right. When we and go to a bowling alley with my brother on Saturdays, right? And kids would make fun of him when he would go up to bowl, to the point where I literally took my ball and went to the lane 2 lanes over and threw my ball down their lane, right? And because out of anger, right? So I, as a sibling, experienced that, what my brother, the teasing, the ridicule, their whispering. So I saw it from both sides. So that really
That's
was
allyship.
right.
That's the allyship, right? So right
Yeah.
now, what it's like when we're thinking about like where are we looking to go with all of this, right? In terms of empowerment,
Yeah.
it's empowering people to neutralize disability. It's giving that, like, if we could, I mean, it's to your case in point, right? So we look for individuals like you to serve as the model, because everything you just described is what we want. Culture. We want a culture where if you see something that really is ableist, where you can stand up and say, hey, knock it off, or that's not right. Or come and join us,
Yeah.
lean in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Incredibly powerful.
That's exactly right. Thank you for that. Again, that teaching an empowerment position, because people just don't know, because we can't talk about it, right? Because it's uncomfortable. So when we talk about that shift, so changing the conversation to empowerment, right? And finding those advocates, being able to speak about it. I want to shift, because we're taking from judgment to curiosity. So I would love, Kristin, if you would kind of slide in here and how we shift, especially when we talk about your especially lived experience and how this whole started about privilege conversation to get people to talk about the uncomfortable. I'd appreciate if you could just transition there.
Absolutely. I mean, I love everything, everything Michelle you said and Jan you're saying. And I think, I will tell you this about mental health. The media does not help. Okay.
No, it does not.
There's a lot of things that when we talk about these things, this judgment, and as Michelle said, judgy thing, this judgment, we have a lot of things that are obstacles that are going against having privileged conversations, because people are scared to ask the questions. One of the things that we do when we go in, or that I do when I go in, is I never forget the very first time I shared my mental health conditions, my lived experiences. I was petrified. I thought, oh my gosh, people are going to come out. I even had people tell me, Kristin, once you put it out there, you can't take it back. Once you put it out that you have PTSD, clinical depression, clinical anxiety, you can't take it back. And I said, I'm willing to take that chance, because someone needs to stand up and start talking about it to normalize it and change the narrative. One of the most amazing, I have 2 examples I'm going to give. One of the most amazing examples or that I was a part of. We launched something with a large company where the senior leadership got up and shared their lived experiences, their mental health lived experiences. And it was so amazing that the chief human resource officer decided to do it every year. And they did something every quarter about mental health, because the employees, and this was satellited out across all the United States and globally, were so impacted by them sharing their lived experiences. That and in this last project we're doing right now, we did focus groups. They said, Kristin, when you share your lived experiences, I mean, we're talking like 100 people on these calls. They're like, that really was such an example for us. And that's what something we want to do. We want to have like basically group meetings to share our lived experiences, take excerpts from a book that they have a book club, right? And share those experiences. But one of the ones that's really amazing to me, and I will never forget it. And this is when it really hit me. I was in my accountant's office, and he knows what we do, Mental Wellness Unleashed. And he knows about my background, because we were talking about things. And he came up to me one day and I was saying, he goes, Kristin, can someone seriously have depression if they're only 10 or 12 years old? Like, really? I'm like, and I felt so privileged that he felt comfortable asking me that question. I said, and because it's all about education and awareness. Yeah. We know this, right? About all the stuff. If we just do more education and awareness, people will have the curiosity to ask those questions. And I said, I'm so glad you asked me that question. Let me tell you, because I have a friend that says that the son's gotten depression. I said, absolutely. I said, I had depression since I could remember, right? And that was before I was even 10. So, and had to do with the trauma experience. So
Yeah.
so we sat down and we talked about it. And he goes, thank you so much for educating me. I cannot wait to tell my friend about this, because I didn't think there was any way that a child could have depression when they're 10 or 12 years old. And then I started talking about something else called the imposter syndrome. And I said that's something. He goes, oh my God, come in here. One of his assistants, and she came in and I explained what imposter syndrome was. All right, feeling that you're fraudulent in what you do, whether it's work or you're doing something that you think you're not worthy of doing. And she's like, that's exactly what my friend has. So then I explained that to her, and he was excited. So I mean, the fact that he felt comfortable enough to ask me these questions and ask me about my own lived experiences and what I went through. And this is an hour conversation. I walked out of that door, and the first word that came into my mind was, I feel so privileged and honored that he asked me questions about not only about mental health, about my own lived experiences, but something that he could educate his friend, right?
Yes, right. Share that knowledge, right?
So that's why I'm so excited about what we do, because we're able to educate and bring awareness to massive groups of people, right? Not just in a corporation. Or corporations, I call it living your limitation self, because I could never tell anybody that I had that I was diagnosed with this, right? So, but people will be like, how do you, and people are like, you're in HR, because HR gets that bad rap, right? Like, because they confided in me, and they're like, how do you know so much about mental health, and why are you such a trustworthy HR person? Like they hell, they're just asking me these questions.
That's exactly your point, though, as far as trustworthy. Okay,
trustworthy, because that safety arena that we build to be able to have those conversations within work and outside of work, right? That's safety, that non-judgment, that not shame. There's no shame and no blame. I love questions. I love people asking me questions. I, to Michelle's point, be curious, ask those questions. The media has it all wrong. I have something in front of me, and it's called the Violence Project, and it talks about the 4 stages of when these shootings occur, these horrific shootings. There are, and 72%, there's all these different percentages, but 44% of these people are having manifestos, and they're following and it leaks out. Like there's 4 stages, and I won't go through them because we don't have time, but the media has to stop clumping mental health and this person. People that do those types of things, unfortunately, are psychopathic. That's way beyond mental wellness.
Way
beyond.
And
PTSD can get a bad rap, right? And so I'm trying to educate as many people as I can around what PTSD is, right? And what triggers mean, why something might trigger someone versus why it doesn't trigger someone else. We have to be understanding and non-judgmental, and we have to be, as Michelle said and Jen said, curious and non-judging and non-shaming and non-blaming.
And part of that, Kristin, comes with holding the space and the opportunities for people to say, I might not get it right, but I'm here to engage in the challenging conversations, right? So we're happy to educate, but we will always pause. And if what we're answering, or if something speaks to you, like on this call or whatever, access us, email us, because we are so beyond committed to shifting the culture, right? And to making these challenging conversations normalized. So part of it is like, we always say, like, for us, like, we'll say, like, be open. We are open, be open to refinement, be open to trying. And if you get it wrong, someone coming in and say, well, actually, or can you use this word instead of, or be open to refinement. And then the other part of it, like Kristin, that you speak to, is like, we recommend, agency. It's about agency.
That's right.
It's about providing people themselves to be empowered to speak, to share, to come to you. And that only happens if, like, this agency and this refinement and this psychological safety is in place, right? I
think you make such a good point, because one of the things that we teach is mindset shifting, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I went through cognitive behavioral therapy, that's literally changing. I have a 180 shift tool that we use, change negative fixed thoughts to positive thoughts, which is your reality. We need to do that for our culture. So we all need to make then a mindset change. We need to have that mindset change for a culture change. And I think once we really start having these conversations like we're having now, normalizing them and changing the narrative, that's when we're going to make that culture shift. That's when it's going to really start to happen. So I get so passionate about these conversations.
No, I love that. And also to tie in what, Michelle said in the beginning, why do we, I know it's common that we lump people together, right? We're lumping, people with disabilities, people with mental wellness, right? I think it's reprogramming our brain to approach everybody as an individual, right? And like we said, somebody with OCD does not, not everybody, just me, I don't know what extreme.
I have OCD.
But that's what I'm saying. But you don't need a caregiver.
No one knows I have it because I mean, that's exactly right. I love when Michelle's talking about it because I'm like, I love what you said. You look at the movie to say this. That's not what OCD is. I mean, can it be to the point where it's that severe? Yes, but so many people have OCD in different ways.
So, Kristin, like when we talk about your tools, right, and with the tools that you offer, it's when somebody comes and says, "Hey, I have OCD," we need the immediate response. I invite the immediate response to be like, "Wait, this is what I've always assumed to know, but I'm going to pause my judgment and I'm just going to open it up and say, great. What do you need to be successful, friend? Friend, what can I do to help you be successful here on the job?" That's all that needs to happen. They don't need to go in. They don't need to open up.
Yes.
What are your needs? What can I do to help you be successful? Where is there a potential barrier? And what could I do to prevent you to remove it? Right? Like,
I mean, how do we solve, like, what do you need? Like, we don't.
And here's the shift in the model, Jen. You talked about like the doctors and the medical space. In the office space and in the workspace, the employee, the candidate, the individual will guide you. They can serve as a guide. What do you need to be successful? Well, this is what's worked for me in the past. This is what I'm looking for now. It doesn't have to be much more than that.
What do you need now? And I think that comes back to present moment, right? We talk about, we got to have a background on this person or whatever. No, you don't. If they come in and they share that with you and you're a manager or you're a co-worker or you're a supervisor or HR representative and somebody feels like, I have OCD. Okay, great. What do we need to do to make you successful? Like what, like how hard can this flip and be, right? But it's your response or your response, meaning if somebody comes to you and says something vulnerable like that in that position and shares that, like your best opportunity is how can I help you? Like what can I do to support you? And let them hear, right?
And I'm
privilege. They're asking, they're saying, they trust you, and that you have the privilege to say, thank you so much for coming to me and share. People with anxiety, the statistics of people that won't share they have anxiety at work is ridiculous. Everybody has anxiety at some point in time. Why can't we talk about it? Right.
That's right.
So when people were coming to me, I felt privileged because I'm like, I can help you. I totally understand where you're coming from. I can definitely help you. And I totally understand where you're coming from. And you don't have to understand. Sometimes just listen.
Just be there, right?
Earlier. And be open to pause and say, how can I help you? What can I do to help you?
And in the disability space, this is like, we're 32 years down with regards to the civil rights law, which is very young. But the big shift has been moving away from this medical model of, you disclose to human resources and human resources then tells you what you can and cannot do, to really one of privilege. It is in my work, I feel this every day. It is my honor, it is my privilege to be in service of making the world a more inclusive and accessible place.
I love that.
Truly, it's with great humility, really. Like, I love what I do, and it's a great privilege. So
inclusivity is it. I mean, that's really where we are with psychological safety is inviting inclusivity.
I love the fact, to both of you, again, using this term privilege, because I get so wrapped up around the axle when it's used from a negative perspective, right? Because when, you hear the word, everybody right now, because of how it's used, it's like shame and blame. And I'm like, you know what? No, we need to start, we get to turn this around, and then to have it support inclusion, have it support disabilities, right? How can we use this term to where we can feel empowered and feel joy from it, right? And I am just so glad to have both of you to really be a force multiplier today, to be able to use that word from an uplifting, supportive mindset. And it makes us feel uplifted and supported, you know, by the very work that we all three do to uplift others, right? And especially when it comes to inclusion. Oh my gosh, I can't believe our time is up by now,
goodness,
but
that's so fast.
just, gosh, I know. I just so appreciate, again, this moment to be able to have the privilege of talking about privileged conversations, how to create psychologically safe environments, hold space for others to, you know, listen, for us to listen to others, and really share that, those ways to do that. So thank you so much. I so appreciate you. And, you know, we have any questions? I know, thank you, Minerva. Thank you, Lindy. Thank you, Vanessa. We have Sheena. Thank you. Is there any other questions, last minute questions that somebody would like to share? All right. Well, we're going to also continue the conversation on the HR Disruptor Summit page. So if anybody has any comments or questions, we'll continue. Michelle and Kristin will also get involved, and feel free to reach out. But again, thank you so much for our time together, and looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks,
Thank you
Michelle.
so much, Jan.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Jan.